This is John Lauder, host of The Cheap Seats. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
You're listening to Catch Up, an official news production of Public House Media.
Today is June 24th, 2020, and it's time to catch up on the news that you need to know about.
Today we're helping you catch up on the earthquake that rocked Mexico's Pacific coast,
demonstrators clashing with police in Washington, D.C.,
tennis star Novak Djokovic testing positive for COVID-19,
and children in Minneapolis that helped raise money for those in need in their community.
We're your hosts, Dan Kotnick
and Madeline Cum. Welcome to Catch Up.
The southern coast of Mexico was hit with a 7.4 magnitude earthquake Tuesday morning, with the epicenter located approximately 190 miles south of Mexico City in the Mexican state, Oaxaca. The earthquake occurred at 10:29 local time, or 11:29 Eastern, and could be felt as far away as Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, with Mexico City reporting minor damage to some buildings and power outages, but nothing major.
So far, the worst hit was the city of Crucecitas, where it was reported at least one person was killed and several more were injured from a building collapse. With communication knocked out around the mostly rural area, officials are still trying to determine the full extent of the damages. However, estimate models from the U.S. Geological Survey suggest casualties and damage should be low. The area of Oaxaca is familiar to powerful earthquakes, as only 3 years ago, in 2017, two powerful quakes of 7.1 and 8.1 struck within 2 weeks of each other, which collapsed dozens of buildings and killed hundreds.
The concern now is preparing for potential fallout in the way of tsunamis. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center said that tsunami waves could be possible within 1,000 kilometers from the epicenter, which includes the Pacific's coasts of Mexico, Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. This is a story that will still be developing, so be sure to follow Catch Up on social media for more updates as they happen.
Demonstrators outside the White House clashed with police Tuesday morning as police forces attempted to clear the activists from the area. The area was focused mostly near Lafayette Square, where demonstrators have regularly protested since the death of George Floyd. It's also close to the same area police forcefully removed protesters near St. John's Church earlier this month to allow President Trump a photo op in front of the church.
One of the main reasons for the clearing of the park was the attempt by protesters to pull down a statue of former President Andrew Jackson Monday night. Police responded with pepper spray and batons to quell the group, with a representative from the National Park Service stating the park was temporarily closed and would work to, quote, prevent the destruction on the Andrew Jackson statue in Lafayette Park.
In response, President Trump announced Tuesday morning that he would sign an executive order punishing those who desecrate monuments to U.S. veterans, acknowledging that federal law already prohibits such acts, saying it would, quote, reinforce what's already there, but in a more uniform way. Trump also has criticized efforts to pull down similar statues around the country, with some protests targeting statues mainly dedicated to those connected to the Confederacy.
Tennis star Novak Djokovic has announced Tuesday that he and his wife Helena have tested positive for the coronavirus after participating in a tennis exhibition last week. The Adria Tour, an exhibition tournament organized by Djokovic, was played in different countries around the Balkans. Djokovic's positive test comes after the tournament's final match scheduled for Sunday was canceled, following a positive test of Grigor Dimitrov, who was going to face Djokovic in the final.
The event was organized as a way to raise money for charity while the ATP Tour was postponed until August 14th. The tour began with play in Belgrade earlier this month before moving to its second leg in Croatia, with plans to play in Bosnia and Montenegro. While some welcomed the return of some kind of tennis action, many were critical of how the event had been organized, pointing specifically to the lack of strict health and safety protocols at the events.
In contrast to other major sporting events that have started back up, the Adria Tour allowed spectators to attend the matches with no requirement to wear masks. The players themselves took flack from many in the tennis community for their lack of social distancing measures, with pictures on social media showing players standing shoulder to shoulder and even playing basketball together. Outspoken Australian current player Nick Kyrgios wrote on Twitter, quote, boneheaded decision to go ahead with the exhibition. Speedy recovery, fellas, but that's what happens when you disregard all protocols. This is not a joke, end quote. We're joined now by Catch-Up sports correspondent Frank Gargano. And Frank, the first question I want to ask is, now tennis was probably looking at the outcome of everything that happened in this unsanctioned tournament. What do you think that tennis officials are going to be looking at to change or to address when they kind of come back, seeing as what happened as a result of all of this?
Dan, the whole situation's been kind of tricky with all sports. And with tennis, I mean, just from the reports that came out, you've got everybody saying, maybe it was too early. And of course, everybody's second guessing themselves. So I think tennis, more so than other sports, is going to be even more cautious. I know there's been a lot of reports just here in the States about college football. I think that's one of the bigger questions, with a bunch of student athletes testing positive for coronavirus. We just saw a lot of players tested positive in LSU at Clemson's facilities. So I think those two are really the biggest sports that are being very cautious right now. I wouldn't be surprised if tennis really holds off. And I don't know, if you're an official, do you look at it and say, all right, do we put these people in a bubble for 2 weeks leading up to the tournament? That's something that you could look at, much like what the NBA is doing or the NHL plans to do. But I think that's your only way of getting ready to play these tournaments, and you have to expect that it won't be for a while.
So looking at what some of those other leagues are trying to do, you mentioned the NHL and MLB in particular, leagues that are still trying to get started back up. What do you think they look at here, and how does that affect what they might do? Are they maybe more concerned about players deciding against coming in and trying to overaddress and focus more on that? Like, what do you think the leagues now kind of take from this, like the lesson they learned from this to hopefully put forward when other leagues try to come back? And then not even mentioning, like you said, college football and NFL. Those are two big ones as well that, we'll look at what happens here. So what do you think the biggest takeaway is from those leagues as they look to kind of get started back up?
Right. As far as football goes, it's one of those things where we've got a couple months to think about that. We've got, you've got time for players to think, all right, I've got a little bit of time before we really get back to camp. I know they're doing small functions for college. NFL's been pretty relaxed, I would say, as of right now. Not a whole lot of news coming out of that. I know professional teams are just doing teleconferences for their meetings and stuff. So more to come on football. I don't want to dive too much into that. MLB, since the thing with Major League Baseball is all we've talked about really is the collective bargaining agreement, and are they going to agree to play, and how many games are they going to play? It's just been back and forth, and nobody's really been talking about the virus with Major League Baseball. So today they got the deal done. They're going to play. Everybody's going to report on July 1st. As far as I know, and I could be wrong, I think everyone's mostly going to be in that quote-unquote bubble that I did talk about. So I think they're going to be heavily monitored. The NHL and the NBA has come out, and a couple players, I know Kyrie Irving's outspoken and speaking up for a lot of people, saying they don't want to go to Disney World. They don't want to be in that bubble. They're kind of, again, cautious about the whole situation. They still have a lot of questions. The one that I'm not too worried about right now is the NHL. When Gary Bettman held his press conference to the media over Zoom, like we've done a couple of times, he said, how many times are we going to test? We're going to test these guys up to 3 to 4 times a week. So, okay, that question's answered. Where are they going to be staying? Whatever hub city that they select. I know they're down to 6 cities right now. They announced today. They're basically going to be held in place. If anybody tests positive, they're going to shut it down for a little bit, but the tournament's not going to be canceled. The season's not going to be canceled. If anybody does test positive, they're just going to test the whole team, and they're going to evaluate from there. So I think they have what they're going to do. They're going to do for this season. They have that sorted out. But I mean, with everything, it's the assumed risk. Every team has to know, and every individual player, every individual staff member has to have almost that social contract. Like, I know what I'm getting myself into. And if you want to opt out, I don't think anybody's going to blame you if you're not going to go and play that season. So Major League Baseball, they're going to play. I don't know how quickly they're going to be to shut everything down if a couple of players do test positive. But I think it's going to, after what we just went through with back and forth between the MLBPA and the owners and that whole PR nightmare, I think it's going to take a lot to shut down. So Major League Baseball will play. I don't know for how long. Can they get through the season? Maybe. We'll see.
So basically, the end-all be-all is kind of treat this as a unique situation. If we take the proper protocol, we shouldn't run into the same problems here. That kind of sums it up, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's so much of the unknown. Yeah, like I said, all the players know what they're getting themselves into. But if it does come to a point where we're seeing a big spike, don't be surprised if these owners and league leaders shut things down. And that goes for Major League Baseball, that goes for the NBA, and as much as I think that NHL has handled things very well, it could be them too. So we're just in a unique situation. I think along with a lot of people, we're just trying to get through 2020, Dan.
You and me both. I appreciate it.
We are.
Well, Frank, thank you for taking the time to come on and talk with us. We always appreciate the time.
Absolutely, Dan.
Branching into some happy news, a group of 9-year-old kids in Minneapolis have raised $100,000 selling bracelets to support Black-owned businesses and families. Due to the coronavirus pandemic and murder of George Floyd, the city of Minneapolis has been hit hard, and Cameron Johnson and her friends hope their donations help those affected get back on their feet. The bracelets are $5 and are coupled with a GoFundMe page that itself has raised $46,000. Cameron's father mentioned that this impact does go farther than just monetary donations. I quote, "Day after day, we're having impactful conversations with so many people. So many of our community members have come by to drop off supplies or just talk about things like racism and injustice, stuff that we don't talk about very often. This goes to show how drops in the ocean can have quite the impact."
Thanks for catching up on today's news with us. I'm Dan Kotnick.
And I'm Madeline Cum. Be sure to catch up with us again tomorrow.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts.
We appreciate you listening to Catch Up. For even more content, follow Catch Up Digital on social media. Just search for @TimeForCatchup.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on any of the stories we covered today. Just use the hashtag #PassTheCatchup on social media.
Catch Up is an official production of Public House Media.